Hello. This is a story about a time long before ours, a time when people lived quietly among rocks, trees, and open skies, a time when their lives were shaped by the slow rhythms of weather, seasons, and movement. No grand events, no sudden changes, just the steady passage of days. Before we begin, I wonder, where are you watching this story? What time is it for you now? Feel free to leave a note if you like. If you enjoy quiet stories like this, consider liking and subscribing. It helps the channel continue. Now, if you're ready, we will start. In modern times, people often ask the question, did early humans have a concept of personal space? This question, like many others about prehistoric humans, has no definitive answer. Archaeological records do not provide conclusive evidence about personal boundaries. There are only fragments, stone tools, charred bones. Personal space, being an abstract social concept, leaves no fossil record. Nonetheless, anthropologists hypothesize that early humans may have exhibited rudimentary spatial preferences based on group behavior observed in other primates. These speculations, however, remain unconfirmed. It was perhaps 400,000 years ago. The terrain was flat in some areas, rocky in others. Trees existed, so did shrubs. A group of humans walked, then stopped. Then they walked again. The climate was not the same as today, but not completely different either. There were clouds. Sometimes it rained. One of these early humans was named Og. Of course, he was not really named Og. The concept of naming was not yet linguistically codified in any consistent form. But for the sake of clarity and continuity, he shall be referred to as Og. Og was approximately 1.62 meters tall. His body mass index was within what might today be considered a healthy range. He had limbs, eyes, and a cranium that could accommodate basic reasoning functions. He made sounds. These sounds did not form a structured language, but conveyed simple meanings like food, danger, or come here. There were no verbs. There was no grammar. One day, Og woke up. It was morning. The sun had risen. The sky was somewhat overcast, but not entirely. Og sat up. He scratched a part of his skin. Then he stood. He looked at a tree for about 11 seconds. Nothing happened. He turned away from the tree. His fellow group member, whom we will call Erg, was chewing on something. It was fibrous and possibly edible. Erg did not offer Og any of it. Og did not ask. At some point, Og decided to walk approximately 37 meters away from the group. He squatted. He did something private. Then he stood up again and walked back. No one reacted to this action. If they had, we do not know, but they probably did not. Og's group was composed of 10 individuals. They were not a family, though some of them shared genetic material. They existed together in what could loosely be termed a social unit. They sometimes groomed each other. Other times, they did not. There was no visible hierarchy, but certain individuals were permitted to eat first. This was not codified in any system. It was simply tolerated. Og walked again. This time, he walked longer, perhaps 20 minutes. During this walk, he encountered a rock. He picked up the rock. The rock was slightly heavier than he expected, but not excessively so. He turned it in his hand. Then, he dropped it. He continued walking. He saw a small body of water. It was not large enough to be called a lake. It was not moving enough to be called a river. It was water, and it was there. Og approached it. He looked at it. Then he crouched and drank some of the water. The water was not salty. This was fortunate. A bird flew by. Og looked at it. Then he stopped looking at it. Later, Og returned to his group. They were sitting. Some were eating, others were doing nothing. Og sat. He did nothing. Time passed. A long time. At least 17 minutes. Then, something happened. Erg moved closer to Og. The distance between them decreased. It is possible this made Og uncomfortable. If so, he showed no visible signs of discomfort. Or if he did, we cannot say what they were. Still, Erg eventually moved away again. This may indicate some early awareness of Og's spatial preferences, or it may have meant nothing. At night, the group sat near a small fire. The fire had been started earlier in the day using friction and dried grass. It was not a large fire. The group sat around it, not in a circle, but in an irregular cluster. Og was nearest to the fire. This was not a privilege. It was simply the place he had chosen to sit. He watched the flames. They moved. Someone coughed. The group slept. Days passed. Then weeks. Then more days. Og repeated many of the same actions. He walked. He drank. He watched. He sat. Once he touched another human's shoulder, perhaps by accident. The other human did not visibly respond. This might be considered an early test of personal space, or it might have been meaningless. Eventually, Og became older. He lost strength in his limbs. He sat more often. His contributions to the group decreased. Then something not well understood happened. Og appeared to stop breathing, but then resumed. He was not gone. He was not strong either. For 3 cycles of light and dark, he lay still, blinking. On the 4th day, he sat up. The group, having remained nearby out of habit more than concern, did not appear surprised. Og blinked more. He coughed. Then he stood, very slowly. His return to activity was not a full recovery. He remained slower. But from this point on, something subtle changed. Og no longer sat near others. He would adjust his position if someone came too close. This adjustment was not aggressive. It was not deliberate. It simply occurred. The others did not always notice. When they did, they moved too. Not out of respect, but because something in the group dynamic shifted when Og repositioned. Proximity to Og became associated with mild uncertainty. One day, a new group arrived. They were similar, but not the same. There were glances, grunts. One from the new group, taller than Og, approached too closely. Og did not move back. He stood still. The taller one grunted again. Then Og walked away. He found a new sitting place. It was several paces further from the group than usual. The tall one did not follow. This repeated. Over time, others in Og's original group began copying his distances. Not all the time, but often enough that the new group noticed. No confrontation occurred, but the groups maintained distance. There was no conflict. There was no union. There was spem. One might say personal space had emerged, slowly, without rules, without discussion. But it had shape, and it had weight. And Og, mostly unaware of this effect, lived the rest of his days with slightly more room around him than he had before. He sat often. He watched more. Others did not sit too close. This was enough. After Og, there was Thu. Thu was born to the group, possibly the child of someone who had once groomed Og, possibly not. There was no memory. The group never used the past in their gestures. What had happened did not carry through days. Only behaviors did. Thu walked with the group, but she often walked several steps behind. Not because she was weak. She was not. It was simply what she did. When another walked too near her, she shifted slightly. There was no sound, no expression, just a shift. Eventually, the others began to expect her to shift. When sleeping, Thu positioned herself near rocks or trunks. She liked the feeling of having one side protected. When this was not possible, she curled in a tighter form. No one copied this, but no one disturbed her either. One evening, a younger group member named Egg moved close to Thu. He lay down with his arm grazing hers. Thu stood up. She did not leave the firelight. She moved to the other side. The motion was not sudden. Egg did not react, but he did not try again. In the following days, others adjusted where they sat when Thu approached. Not far, but enough. No conflict arose. No understanding did either. There were only movements. The fire remained small. The group remained 10. Sometimes 9, sometimes 11, then back to 10. Space now was part of movement. It was part of walking, sitting, and sleeping. It was never mentioned, but it was there. A dry season came. The trees had fewer leaves. The shrubs were brittle. Animals moved less frequently and in more linear paths. Water required walking, sometimes a long time. The group walked more. Thu still trailed behind. The others did not question it. One day, while foraging, Thu found a shallow pit in the dirt where water had collected under a sloping stone. She drank. Then she moved away. She made no signal. Later, others arrived. They saw the prints her feet had left. They saw the drops of moisture near the stone. They found the water. Thu did not lead them there, but she had not stayed to conceal it either. It was not shared, but it was not withheld. This repeated. Her distance meant she found things first. Small things. A mushroom. A spot of shade. A path that led to nothing, but with fewer thorns. Others began to observe from a farther distance. Without agreement, they left more room around Thu. When she stood, they did not follow. When she stopped, period. When she moved again, they followed loosely. This was not strategy, it was pattern. The dry season passed. Some had left the group. Others had joined. The fire remained small. The group sat with spaces between. It did not form a shape. It simply formed. No one asked why. But the space stayed. After the dry season, rains returned. They were not constant, nor were they absent. They occurred at intervals that did not follow a precise pattern. Sometimes they came during sleep. Other times, they came during movement. The group did not prepare for them. When it rained, they waited under trees or shallow overhangs. When the rain stopped, they resumed what they were doing before, unless they had forgotten. Thu remained. Others did not. The group changed. The group always changed. There was a male named Drock. He had a scar on his leg that was not visible at a distance, but became visible when he sat. He did not speak often, but none of them did. He stood near others more than was typical. Thu did not move when Drock stood near her, but she did not stay either. When she moved, it was slow, and it was not far, but it was away. Drock noticed this. He did not react. But in the next evenings, he sat near others instead. He did not sit near Thu again. Another figure joined the group during this time. She was older than Thu, but had fewer marks on her skin. Her name is not known. For clarity, she will be referred to as Lo. Lo walked at an even pace. She neither trailed nor led. When others rested, she often stood. She did not sleep early. When she did sleep, it was near the edge of the group, but not where Thu slept. A different edge. Eventually, Thu and Lo stood at the same time. They looked at similar directions. Once, they both turned when a bird flew overhead. They did not look at each other, but they were aware of the other's awareness. They both walked slower than the rest. Not in unison, but close enough that others noticed. The group began to leave more room for them. Not out of deference, not out of belief, only because that was what the spacing now was. When the group ate, they sat in a dispersed cluster. There was no defined center. Some chewed, others waited. Some moved while chewing. No one instructed this. No one objected. Once, a younger male, barely taller than the grasses in early growth, tried to sit between Thu and Lo. There was space, but it was not enough space. Thu rose. She walked 6 steps and crouched again. Lo did not move, but she adjusted her torso by 10 degrees. The younger male paused. He did not finish sitting. He moved to another spot. The moment was quiet. It did not last long, but its memory remained in the group's spacing. From then on, a loose awareness developed. The place where Thu sat would remain slightly larger than her own body. No one designated this space, but it remained. Lo's presence amplified this. Though she never moved when crowded, others began leaving space near her too. Not because of who she was, but because of what she didn't do. Eventually, Lo coughed repeatedly over several dark light cycles. Her body leaned forward more often. Her hands stayed on the ground longer. Then she stopped moving altogether. The group did not gather. They watched from their places. Thu sat near a rock. She watched, too. Then she turned away. By nightfall, Lo had not moved. The group moved the next day. Lo did not. This was not ceremony. It was continuation. Thu remained quiet in her movements. As the terrain changed, she preferred open areas with one side bordered by stone or slope. When they came to a cave, she did not enter deeply. She stayed near the outer edge. Others moved deeper. There were no rules about this, but the pattern remained. In time, a new small one began walking. He fell often. He did not speak yet. He followed one of the older females, possibly his birth giver. But he also followed Thu, though she gave no response to this. She never looked directly at him. She did not touch him, but when he followed, she did not move faster, and she did not stop him. Eventually, the small one sat beside her. Once, then again. The group noticed. No one intervened. On the third instance, Thu shifted, not away. She shifted sideways, leaving a space between herself and the child. The space was just large enough for him to fall into sleep without touching her. He did. This pattern too remained. The child sat near her, but never close. Over the following dark light cycles, he began to mimic her walking distance. He paused when she paused. When others sat together, he waited before sitting. If there was no space, he stood. No one instructed this. No one named it. The group's average spacing increased, not significantly, but measurably. They still groomed one another sometimes. They still touched shoulders in moments of coordination or passing. But after sitting, individuals would leave more distance between their knees. When sleeping, there were now visible gaps between most bodies, small but repeated. Thu said nothing. She still positioned herself near trunks. She still moved away when brushed, but not with alarm, only with quiet motion. Over many seasons, the fire changed shape. Once round, it now elongated. Not intentionally. It changed because the people around it had changed. They sat at new distances. The fire adjusted, or rather, the people adjusted the fire. None of this was planned. None of this was discussed. But personal space had shape now. And not only shape, it had memory. When a stranger passed by, a lone male from another group, he attempted to sit near them. He sat too close. They all moved, not all at once, not quickly, but one by one they shifted. Inwardly, outwardly, quietly, until he stood again and left. He did not return. The group did not acknowledge this as an event. But after this, their pattern solidified. A radius around each person became normal. Even the child, now older, respected this radius, especially around Thu. The group moved north when the air grew wet but cold. They had no names for direction. They followed warmth, though they did not speak of it that way. The ground in this region was flatter. Stones were smaller. There were fewer caves. Nights were longer. Some found this troubling. Some did not. At dusk, they began building screens of loosely stacked sticks. These were not walls. They offered no real protection, but they created separations. Individuals placed them beside their own rest spaces. One began, then others did. Soon, most had a barrier, not for weather, not for defense, just for definition. These stick arrangements fell in the wind. No one rebuilt them. New ones were made elsewhere. A child, perhaps 8 or 9 cycles old, built 2 around herself, one in front, one behind. She sat between them, not touching either. Her mother sat nearby, but not within the enclosure. She watched her child, but did not enter. That night, 3 others copied the 2-stick method. By the end of the cold season, over half the group had done so. The fire now burned in 2 long lines. Not a circle. Each line had gaps. Those who sat by it kept their knees inward. If a foot strayed close to another, it was slowly retracted. No one corrected this. No one mentioned it, but it happened repeatedly. One individual, older, nearly blind, forgot this pattern. She sat close to another. He stood and walked away. She remained sitting. Eventually, she moved too. After that, someone guided her gently by the elbow at night, toward an open patch. They placed her near the others, but not too near. She made no sound. She slept. Eventually, she stopped waking up. Her stick screen remained standing for 2 nights. Then it collapsed. The sticks were not reused. The group moved on. In another place, flatter, warmer, a new thing happened. A boy approached another too closely. He was young, barely walking well. He touched the arm of an older male while he was eating. The male paused. He looked at the boy. He blinked once. Then he placed the meat down, stood, and walked 3 body lengths away. The boy looked down. He did not follow. Later, the boy was seen collecting pebbles. He placed one next to his leg, then another a little farther, then a third. A curved line began to form. It was not perfect. It wobbled. But when he sat inside it, he was alone. A female passed. She stopped at the edge of the line. She did not step over it. She waited. Then she turned and walked another way. That night, the boy did not build the pebble arc again, but others remember. A youth made a half ring of bones the next day. He placed them around his sleeping area. Not many, just enough to suggest a shape. No one entered it. Over time, these patterns became habit. Not all made shapes, but all respected them. One day, a new group came. 5 of them. They followed from a distance and then walked close. They were similar. Skin, posture, smell, all alike. But their spacing was different. They stood closer together. When they walked, they brushed shoulders. One of them laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. No one in the original group responded. They stood still. They waited. The new group sat nearby. 2 nearby. 1 night passed. Then a second. On the 3rd morning, the original group walked away without signaling. They did not run. They did not speak. They did not explain. They just moved. The new group followed for a while. Then they stopped. Eventually, they turned in another direction. The original group never mentioned them again. There was nothing to say. Years passed. Those who had known Thu were now gone. But a clearing remained where she once slept. No one dug there. No one sat there. Even after vegetation returned, even after seasons turned, it was always passed by. A younger child once pointed at it. He walked toward it. His mother placed her hand lightly on his back. He turned. They walked away. That was enough. The group began walking slower as time went on. Not from weakness. It simply suited them. New children were born. They learned to crawl at the edge of resting spaces. If they crawled into another space, the other moved, not fast, just enough. Soon, they stopped crawling into those spaces at all. No one remembered who first moved away, or when, but everyone had learned. The space remained. The child was born at the beginning of a cold stretch. The wind did not howl. It moved steadily. He did not cry often. He slept between two stones that had been placed before his birth. They were not arranged deliberately, but they were there. His mother used them as a boundary. He learned to sit before he learned to crawl. When he sat, he looked at others. He watched how they moved. Sometimes they moved together, sometimes apart. He did not know why. He learned not to reach. When another passed nearby, he held his hands close to his chest. When others sat, he looked for the empty place. If there was no empty place, he stood. He was not told to do this. When he was old enough to chew meat, he waited for it to be placed near him. He did not take it from others. If it was far, he did not eat. He watched others more than he moved. He had no name, but some called him heen, the soft sound he made when breathing in sleep. When he reached half the height of the tallest adult, he began walking with them. He did not lead. He did not follow. He stayed to the side. On one walk, a female fell behind. Heen waited with her. She did not speak. She sat on a low slope. He stood nearby. She pointed to a dead tree. He looked. There was nothing under it, no animal, no danger, just the tree. They did not move for a long time. When the group reappeared in the distance, they rejoined it. No one questioned the delay. Heen began walking beside others more often, not closely, just within reach. But he still stepped away when stopped. He began shaping earth with his heels as Thu had once done. No one had taught him, but the motion felt familiar. He made shallow rests, not deep. He slept in them alone. Later, a younger child came and stepped into his hollow. Heen was already sitting nearby. He stood and walked in a wide arc. He made another. The younger child watched him, then lay down where Heen had been. Heen did not return to that hollow again. Seasons passed. The group found a place with standing stones, not placed by humans. They were shaped by weather. Still, they suggested meaning. Heen chose to sleep near one. It was not tall, but it was upright. Others stayed away. On the fifth night, another sat across from him, on the other side of the stone. They could see each other. They did not speak. In the morning, both were still sitting. They repeated this again the next evening. Others saw. A few began doing the same, finding stones or fallen logs to divide their sleeping spaces. Not all did this. Some remained without structure, but enough followed that it became noticeable. Over time, Heen moved farther away from the group during rest, only slightly. He sat beneath sloped rocks. He dug smaller hollows. When others approached, he stood and gave them space. One child began to follow him. As he had once followed Thu, the child imitated his movements. When Heen placed a flat stone beside his rest, the child found one too. When Heen touched his own chest before walking, the child began doing the same. Heen never looked at the child directly, but he walked more slowly when the child was near. He paused longer near water. He left food scraps in the open. The child grew taller. One day, Heen entered a cave alone. It was not deep. The ceiling was low. Inside, he sat. He did not sleep. He traced lines in the dirt. The lines had no pattern, but he placed his palm next to one. The size of his hand was visible. Then he stood and left. Later, the child found the cave. He saw the lines. He placed his own hand near Heen's. It was smaller. He did not erase the marks. He sat nearby. Then he left. Others never entered the cave. Time passed. Heen aged. His pace slowed. His shoulders curved forward. He no longer made hollows. He sat near existing ones, but not in them. The child, now grown, made hollows again. He made two side by side. Heen sat near them once, then he sat farther, then not at all. Eventually, Heen stopped walking with the group. He stood one morning, then sat again. He remained seated all day. The next day, he was still there. The group did not gather. The child sat nearby for half the day. Again he walked on. Heen did not move again. His hollow remained empty for many days. Then it disappeared under leaves and dust, but the space stayed. The child, now adult, made a ring of stones one day. It was wider than he needed. He sat inside. He closed his eyes. No one entered it. No one asked. The man who once followed Heen was now older. His back did not bend yet, but his knees slowed. He no longer collected kindling. Others did that. He no longer climbed slop. Some still remembered when he had made the wide scone ring and sat inside it. The ring was gone now, washed away by time, covered by soil. But they remembered. A child, no taller than a fire pit, began collecting stones. She made a line, not a ring. She sat on one side of it. She did not look up. No one corrected her. That night, she slept alone. In the morning, she was still there. The line remained. The man watched her from where he sat. He did not speak, but he adjusted his legs slightly. His heel pointed toward her, not away. This was noticed. Others began placing objects near their sleeping places. A curved branch, a flat bone, a heap of dried moss. These were not tools. They were not shelters, but they were indicators. They marked space. Some sat between two bones. Others curled beside one large rock. A boy used his foot to draw a shallow trench around himself before sleeping. It was not deep, but it made a shape. Shapes, once accidental, were now inte. The fire now had 3 separate points, not a single source. 3 small fires lit near dusk. Each had its own cluster of people, never tightly formed, never symmetrical, but consistent. Some moved between the fires. Some stayed by one. Each cluster developed its own distance. The space between 2 people varied slightly from one fire to the next. These small variations were not spoken about, but they were known. One child moved from one fire to another and sat too close. He was bumped, gently, not with force, but with meaning. He sat back. The next night, he sat farther apart. No one told him to. The behavior continued. Rain came harder the next year. Many did not build hollows. They dug small canals instead, to drain water from around their resting spots. The canals also served another purpose. They formed boundaries. The man who had followed Heen now slept between 2 shallow ditches. They were not symmetrical, but they formed a loose oval. Others passed near, but not through. He no longer rose early. When he did stand, it was slow. A younger female offered him roots. He accepted them with a single blink. Later that night, he placed a pebble beside her sleeping place. Then he walked away. She kept the pebble there for many days. Then it was gone. A new generation grew. They did not remember Heen. They never knew Thu, but they lived among shapes. They knew that hollowed places were for individuals. that scones marked rest, that food was passed, not taken, that one should sit slightly apart unless invited by motion, a glance, a lean, a blink. A child named Nothing, he had no name, began to pile dry leaves beside him every night. Then he would blow them away before sleep. He never explained this, but others began doing it too. A group of 3, 2 adults and 1 small, began walking always in a triangle formation. Not close, just evenly spaced. It was not deliberate at first, but it became noticeable. They stood this way even when stopping to drink. Eventually, others copied this pattern in new combinations: rows, arcs, pairs walking wide. From the sky, the group now formed visible shapes, not organized, not symbolic, but patterned. One night, a comet passed. No one called it that, but it was bright. Many watched. Some reached out toward it. Others crouched lower. In the days that followed, a few individuals gathered stones and placed them in a curve facing the sky. They sat behind it, not in worship, but as orientation. Later, this curve was reused, not every night, but regularly. A space began to form, not just around individuals, but around events: the fire, the fallen tree, the curve of stones. These two became centers with distance. No one stepped into the middle without pause. When they crossed a river, they placed pebbles on the bank, small ones, not arranged, but spaced apart. This continued every time they crossed. The pebbles were never removed. Over many seasons, those who had placed the first markers were gone. Their shapes remained for a time, then vanished. But a new custom held. Before lying down, each individual looked around, found a space, and waited. Only after a moment would they begin shaping it. A ring of sticks, a trench, a bone, a pile of moss. Each shape was different, but the act of creating it was the same. No one asked why, but the space remained. Over many cycles of sun and rain, the silent habit of space quietly shaped the lives of those who walked this land long before words. From Thu's shallow resting hollows to Heen's stone rings, and then to the uncounted gestures of generations after, the unspoken understanding of personal space endured. It was neither named nor explained. It simply was. Through time, this space became more than a gap. It became a boundary, a marker, a pattern. It gave shape to rest, to movement, to shared moments. And without fanfare or notice, it grew into a subtle order, a quiet map written not in stone or bone, but in the rhythms of being. As the fire's glow fades and the night grows still, we leave this story where it began, with distance, with quiet, with space. Good night.